Hello, everybody. Adam Parks here with another webinar with Receivables Info. Today, we're going to talk about solution-based selling. And this is, I think, an incredibly important function from a sales perspective, is not just selling to people, but helping them actually solve their problems. So today, I've got two great guests with me. I've got Cris with Latitude and Jon with TEC that are both working together to solve problems for their client base. So just to kind of kick it off here today, guys, Cris, let's start with you. Could you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and how you got to the seat that you're in today?
Happy to. Thanks, everybody. Cris Bjelajac. I'm Senior Director of Business Operations for Latitude by Genesys. I got into the collections industry many years ago in the with a company called Soundbite Communications. It was an outbound dialer, and then Genesys purchased Soundbite, and then was out of collections for a little bit, and then came back on when Genesys acquired Interactive Intelligence and Latitude by Genesys at that time. So I was in for about 7 or 8 years, out for a few, and then back in for the last 5 here. So excited to be a part of this program today.
I don't want to go all Al Pacino there, but like every time you try to get out, they pull you back in.
Pull you back in.
Jon, how about you? Could you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and how you got to the seat you're in today? Oh, we got an internet glitch. Jon, you there?
I think I do. Yeah, it's. Am I online now?
You're good.
It's very, very slow. Let me try one thing real quick.
That's all right. So for those of you that are watching, apologies for the technical issues today, but we had to make Jon come on from a hotel room, and he's currently hopping hot spots, which happens to the best of us. I know I've been in that situation more than a few times. Well, you know what? Let's, Cris, we can kind of start it on the conversation here, and as Jon comes back on, we can let him do his introduction. But one of the things that I wanted to cover here, because I think it's important for the context of this discussion, and that's the Latitude TEC relationship and what that ultimately means. So, Cris, you want to talk a little bit about like how your two organizations work together?
Absolutely. And it really ties into the topic today is, why did Latitude and TEC decide to kind of more closely align and have a much closer relationship? For those of you not aware of Latitude, a system of record for collections for many, many years. And we have typically, over all those years until very recently, have gone direct to the marketplace, meaning we have salespeople that would sell Latitude directly and just sell Latitude, basically. Over the last few years that I've been involved, what we have seen in the marketplace is customers not just wanting to buy a single point solution, but we're looking for a lot more around it. So we have a bunch of integrated vendors, but we have so many, we don't have the institutional knowledge within Latitude to sort of, bring forward the right solution that make available to the customer. And so I always felt like that was something that was a little missing from the way we were going to market. And Jon and I started talking about furthering our relationship, and that really worked out good, is because customers who are looking to buy a new CRM or replace their existing CRM with Latitude need more than just just the Latitude knowledge. They need more in the ecosystem around that. And that's where TEC plays a huge role for us.
I think everybody's looking at that ecosystem, right? Like that's the world in which we live now, because any one piece of software, that's great. But if we're not integrated or we're creating disparate systems across our organizations, we're putting ourselves in a very, very weak position, right, in order to execute. But it looks like, Jon, we got you back. Are you there?
I am here, and to the audience, I apologize. I am here, and to the audience, I apologize. Hotspot in a hotel room in California. Hotspot in a hotel room in California. But hopefully I stay on. Cris, hopefully I stay on. Cris, I think Cris said it best.
Yeah, yeah.
I think
we
Cris
started this whole endeavor with Latitude. When we started, we really didn't know with Latitude
where things.
We really didn't know
because we had been
where things would
TEC's
go,
been in the industry for
we
27
had been
years.
TEC's been in the industry for 27 years, offering professional services and advice and
but we didn't
recommendations
have
on technology.
an ecosystem.
But we didn't
have
have as a solution,
an ecosystem
and
to put forth.
I think one of the
as a
things we
solution.
found
And
is not only with
I think
our
one of the
relationship
things
with
we
Latitude,
found
but also our
is
relationship
not only
with many
with our
other
relationship
vendors,
with Latitude,
but also our
we've
relationship
been able
with many
to
other
offer,
vendors. You know, that
we've been able to
of
offer,
what a technology platform
that
would
complete
look like.
picture
So
of what a technology
it's
platform
blending
would look
the
like. So
advice
along
blending
with the
technology
technology
with it,
advice
and,
along with the
and
technology.
customers have been really receptive to it. It's been a lot of fun. And customers have been really receptive to it.
I think
It's been a lot
connecting
of
those
fun.
pieces is key, right? Because even if you're looking to upgrade a dialer, a compliance management system, whatever it is that you're looking to update within your organization, it all needs to talk to each other, right? And I feel like Latitude has always been like, if I look at the technology within an organization, I look at Latitude or the CRM as kind of that hub in the center, right? And then you have all of these spokes that go out to your wheel, being all of your other technology. And I feel like TEC has always kind of been the spokes, right? Like TEC has been that connector or that conduit that brings these pieces of technology together, whether it be through the consulting or custom development or whatever the case may be.
That's right.
So like coming together from an ecosystem
That's
standpoint seems to make a lot of sense. And also understanding the difference between that direct and indirect sales model, right? Because going out and having a software company sell directly versus having it be part of a larger solution base and finding those opportunities to improve the end user experiences through tying together multiple pieces of technology.
You know what?
That's right. I mean, there's other technology. I mean, there's other
in many other
technology
fields. I think
we're now
in many other
experiencing
fields. I
in
think
the ARM space.
we're now
this,
experiencing
kind of evolution of indirect
this,
sales, but it's
kind
been
of
in the
evolution
technology world
of indirect
sales,
but
it's been in the technology
Salesforce
world
did it
for
very
many
well.
years.
Where they have
Salesforce
a
did it
very
centralized
CRM
platform, but
very
there's many
centralized
other
CRM
technologies to go
platform,
around
there's
it, and they
many
use a reseller
other technologies to go around it,
and
that's the model
to get
we're
that
really
out there,
modeling
and
this
that's
after.
the
It's
model
worked extremely well with
we're really
Latitude.
modeling this after.
Salesforce has exploded after they launched their app exchange, right? And creating those conduits and interactions between the systems and those third-party partners. And it sounds like you guys are in very much a similar position, right? Being like TEC is almost like that app exchange as it ties back to a Latitude or CRM system.
I think it takes a lot of the stress out of the buying situation and the selling side as well. If you're not talking about the solution and how to solve the customer's problem, and you're just sort of, from a software provider's standpoint, you're just trying to sell your solution into them, it's stressful for the seller. It's like, I don't know exactly what this guy's trying to accomplish. I hope I'm the right solution. I don't necessarily want to sell him my solution if I'm not the right solution to him. And I don't know what else he's looking at, he or she is looking at. On their side of the things, it's stressful to buy and to manage all these conversations that you're having with multiple vendors. If you can sort of sit back and relax and have somebody sort of present to you an ecosystem that meets all of your needs, and you can just sort of concentrate on, is everything that is being presented to me meeting my needs, and is not so much of, point solution here, point solution. Okay, I've got this, and then trying to figure out how that all connects later on down the road, and a stressful professional services engagement where you're connecting all those two. If you're doing it up front, and there's a good relationship between the solution seller and the buyer, that's really, really powerful. And if you're trying to buy nowadays and you're not open to that, you're really, I would say almost decades behind. This is really where modern, software and solution selling is today. And you've got to sort of open yourself up to that.
I think that brings us
and Cris, I think one of the reasons Well,
Go ahead.
And Chris, I think one of the reasons, Chris, one of the reasons our relationship works so well, and one of the reasons our relationship works so well we're creating is the fact that we're creating is TEC's the fact that a trusted advisor. TEC's been a trusted advisor, a lot of technology background, understanding the ins and outs of each vendor, understanding the ins and outs of each vendor, as it pertains to deployment, service, and so on. So that marketplace knowledge, customer service, and so brings a lot marketplace knowledge to brings a lot more decision for top of the line buying decision like Latitude. So top of the line CRM like Latitude. Getting kind of that whole presence. I know it's getting kind of that whole to be even more confident in what they're presenting because they're able to listen. They're able to apply their background and knowledge. They're able to apply their background. 20 plus years of selling experience in the space. 20 plus years of selling experience in the space. Put those pieces together. They're able to kind of put those pieces together and really solve. That's what ultimately we all like to do is solve problems. That's what internally or externally solve problems. Whether that's internally or externally. So that's
being that solution specialist, I think, is incredibly important because it's about solving, not selling, right? Look, I sold used cars in high school. Like if it's time to sit down and sell, I'm prepared to do that all day long. But what I learned through the years was that that's not how you build long-term partnerships. That's not how you build a business, right? That's that churn and burn mentality of the salesman of old. We'll call it the 1980s salesman with the pager. I always think about in my mind. It's a very different animal to what we're doing today, because what we're doing today is trying to let me start with ask the right questions, right? Like it is about trying to understand what their pain points are and where they're trying to go. But how do you guys go about starting that questioning process in that discovery, learn what their real needs are?
Well, I think there's a lot of I think there's a lot of you could apply a lot of techniques and discussion. You could apply a lot of how to go about it. The important part around sales is that it's the important discussion. Sales is that it's a discussion, a two-way discussion, or that has to happen. It's never a presentation or when we go into a discovery process. So when I say that, when we go into a discovery process, set of discussions, the initial kind of set of discussions, gain information and really listen and activate gain information and really listen and activate our good listening skills. We need to build enough dialogue and trust. We need to build enough dialogue and trust. Feel confident enough to open up and really be honest with both us and really be honest about where they want to go. And that's oftentimes about where they want to go. And that's oftentimes creating a gap selling because a dialogue creating where that company needs to get. A dialogue around where they're at today. And once you identify where they're at today, and once you identify solutions that it's much easier to specific needs, and that solution may just be specific needs, and that solution may just be a centralized CRM technology like Latitude. It could be a centralized CRM like Latitude, or it could be a whole set of solutions to get to that end goal in different time periods. It all starts with trust. And I think it all starts with trust. It all starts with honesty. My advice is, if you're not being honest, it's not. My advice is, if you're not being honest, it's probably not even on hold until you're ready. You should just probably until we're all ready to be honest with each other, until we're all ready to be honest with each other and find out where we need to go as a company.
Jon, do you still find that? I used to remember when I was doing demonstrations and trying to sell soundbite years and years ago, buyers can often be very secretive. And I mean that in those negative and positive connotations, and I mean both actually. So, but they feel like it's a game of poker, and they want to hold their hand very close to the vest. And
That's right.
I can't think of one situation where that was really beneficial to both the buyer and seller in that sort of case. And do you still see that, or are you seeing? And I know you've been selling for years. And is it still prevalent, or is it waning?
Well, I think. Yeah, I think there is a shift happening, and I think there is a shift happening, and going back to Adam's used car experience, we've all going back to Adam's used car experience. We've all had that used car salesman, those that can't experience where, right? So they're those that can't do sell. Right, so they're not top of the line anything. They just end up as top of the line anything. They just end up. They can show you what used car and then talk to you about numbers. They can show you what used car and then talk to you about numbers and so on. Sales in the world enterprise sales, technology, in the world software, right? B2B technology, sales, software, and B2B. You're dealing with very smart people. You're dealing with very smart. My sales team, and I mean, my sales team we work with in this industry, and all of the vendors out there having incredibly, and all of the vendors out there having incredibly intelligent sales consultants not so much sales. Right? So it's no longer
not so much
used
sales
car
right?
experience.
So
But
it's no longer
to your point, Chris, I
used
think
car experience.
buyers.
But to your
And
point,
again, I
Chris,
don't
I
even
think
think of them
buyers.
and
My clients
again, I
as
don't
buyers.
even think of them
They're
as
partners. My clients as buyers.
Oftentimes
they're
do
partners.
come into a conversation guarded.
Oftentimes do come into a
They don't
conversation
know
guarded because
we all
they don't
draw on
know
past experiences.
we've all had that
we all
used car
draw on
salesman
past
approach. I don't want to be
experiences. We've all
sold
had that
anything.
used car
I don't
salesman
want to
approach.
sell
I don't want to be
anything. I want to
sold
solve problems.
I don't want to
and,
sell anything. I want to
solve problems.
We're
and,
a small industry. We work with
we're
a lot
a
of
small
same people
industry.
for decades.
We work with a lot
And
of
you
same
have to
people
build a
for
relationship.
decades.
And so I think
And you have to build a relationship.
it is
And so I
starting to
think,
change
where
it is
our
starting to change
partners
where
are starting to
our
trust
partners are starting
that
to
dialogue
trust
and that process more and more.
that dialogue
So it's
and that
becoming
process
easier to
more and more.
so it's becoming easier to sell
as opposed to just
solution sell,
point solution sell.
as opposed to just point.
It is
point
changing,
solution
but
sell.
it's
So
not there yet.
So
It is
it's
changing,
interesting
but it's not there yet.
the way that you asked the question,
How about that?
because I've always called it the trickle of trust, right? As you're going through that discovery process, and as you're getting this like small trickle of trusted information, and some of that can change the game as you're going. So you try to set these like loose parameters at the beginning of the discussion, and as more and more information becomes available, you're getting closer and closer to an actual solution or target that you can provide for them. But it feels like the buyers, especially in our space, right, where it's such a small space and it is so competitive, that people are providing small bits of information as you're getting closer to a solution, because they have those trust issues on some level. Now, definitely seen a shift in that. I mean, solution-based selling in 2010 in this industry and solution-based selling in 2023 are very different animals, right? And it feels like some of that has changed in the last few years, but some of that I think has also just come from the reputations of the individual organizations have been able to establish over that time period.
In my opinion, Chris, Chris, one of the things that do and help my sales team kind of understand is when you're involved in a dialogue. Understand is when you're involved in dialogue directions and branches. A dialogue can take many different directions. I mean, we've all had personal relationships where you thought you were talking about one thing, and all of a sudden you're talking about something else. You thought you were talking about one thing, and all of a sudden you're fighting about something else, or significant other. You're fighting about you didn't even know you were talking about significant other about something. A sales approach, a sales discussion is very similar. A sales approach, you have kind of an anthill where you have kind of an anthill, and you can dive as deep down into a hole, and you can dive as deep down, but you have to be willing to back out of that hole, and then you have to be willing to back out of that hole. And once you get a picture of the other paths, and once you get a picture of that's when you present a solution ecosystem. And so I think the solution. The trick is always to be able to have enough the conversation to be able to specific topic and not kind of get stuck there, and then go down different branches there. And once you poke enough branches, you kind of start getting an understanding. Once you poke enough branches, you kind of start getting an understanding. You present a solution, and that's where the magic happens.
Let me ask you this, John. Do you generally look to provide one potential solution, or do you try and limit it to 2 or 3 solution options and be like, here's the 3 avenues that you could potentially go down? Or do you try and hone it in a little bit further before presenting?
Well, I think one of the exciting things about what TEC is doing, just what we're doing with Latitude, what TEC started doing with other partners in the industry, we do have a lot of opportunities in the industries. We do have a lot of opportunities, or a lot of options to present multiple solutions at one point. I think to Chris's point, the direct sales approach. To Chris's point, the direct sales approach is limiting to the salesperson because they have to get limiting to the salesperson because they have to get that product successful in that relationship. Whereas with successful in that relationship, right now at least our current model, right now at least in our current it really depends on the client. I mean, we have clients. It really depends on the client. We have clients that are implementing new, while they're doing that, they're looking at record. But while they're doing that, they're looking at it from we do to refresh standpoint, update our ecosystem. We do to hosting, update our ecosystem, professional services, or managed services, professional services, print mail services, data services. There's all print mail, data services. There's also obviously down. Our intent obviously is to introduce the right products based on that gap analysis, right? That gap of where they want to get to, versus that gap of where they want to get to. If there's multiple solutions in there, great. So if there's multiple platforms in there, that's great. If it's one platform, that's fantastic.
On the software side of things, it's a software provider, especially somebody with like Latitude, has been around for as many years as we've had. I still get into a conversation with a potential prospect, and I want to be all things to this person. It's just this comes out of your neck, comes out of your heart, comes out of your gut. I just want to be able to solve this person, all their problems. But I have to realize that, the software that we create potentially does not do that.
Mm-hmm.
And no software really can solve all the problems. So I have to be honest with myself. I have to be honest with a potential customer that, okay, we're really good in these areas. We are probably 90 or 80% of what you need in other areas, but these two areas that you've talked about, this is something where we're not probably the best fit. And what I have found over the years is that customers really appreciate that. And when you say things like that, that elicits more trust, which is what you're really trying to do when you're in one of those situations. But on the software side of things, the way software, Latitude was released almost 25 years ago, and it is being built every single day, and it moves and it morphs based on what our current customers are needing and our assessment of where the market is going. And I don't think we don't make any major changes, but we are constantly redirecting. And salespeople are always constantly looking over at the product guys and the product manager and the engineers and say, how come this doesn't do this? Or how come it doesn't do that? And that's not a good way to run a software company. You've got to be able to sort of have a vision, execute against that vision. And if it doesn't fit directly with some customers, you've got to be an adult, and you got to sort of pull back and say, I'm sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, we may not be the right solution to you. And that's just, the way it goes. And hopefully it engenders, good thoughts about you in the marketplace.
But isn't that how you're building relationships? Right.
Yeah,
exactly. Because you're providing them with the
Exactly.
honest feedback, and we
Right.
live in such a small world to where
Exactly
the
right.
next person will be like, yeah, Chris told me that I'm just not the right, like their software wasn't the right fit for me, but maybe it is for you. Right. And I feel like that's a much smaller world conversation.
I have this is something I learned back in college, and I may have said this to you, Adam, in previous, but I was in a fraternity, and you have rush week, and you have all these guys coming through, and they're all looking at all these different fraternity houses, and you're trying to tell them about the good benefits of potentially joining your fraternity, and what we at my fraternity says, we're never, ever, ever going to say something negative about another fraternity. We call that dirty rush, And I can't tell you how many people over the years came back and joined our fraternity because they heard that we were the only fraternity that never said anything negative about something other competitor, if you will, for that person. And so I feel the same way about the software companies and our competitors, and that's it. There's tremendous competitors to Latitude, and they do great work, and they do great work for their customers. And if we're not the right one, I want them to find the right one that fits for their business. I'll be sad. Yeah, I'll be disappointed if they don't buy Latitude, but that's okay as long as their business has become successful. Picking the right solution.
And Chris, I think that's why, solution selling. I think that's why being able to be honest about what your solution does and what problems being able to be honest about what your solution so that you can present that. I think so that you can present that. I think I equate our ecosystem of technology that's available to us kind of similar to the renewable energy, kind of similar to the renewable energy model. Everybody there is everybody find a renewable technology would love to find a renewable source that was perfect in all renewable energy source that was perfect in all applications. Problems and it just magically solved all problems across the board. Is that silver bullet that I see on the screen? But there just
Leah took my note directly there, of course.
You can't build the perfect renewable energy source. Just like you can't build the perfect software. Just like you can't build the perfect it's impossible because software does what
software
does,
and you don't know all the problems that exist when you program it. All the problems that exist when you program it.
I think one of the things we see is
ecosystems of technology. I know I've used that word before, but really, if you think of it that term, where you have a foundational platform,
and that's what you start
Latitude.
your business on, and you say, what can Latitude do for me, and you say, what can Latitude
and then
do
what
for me, and what
pieces that hub and spoke,
and then what
do we need to
pieces
put in
that
place
to fill the needs for
do we
my
need to put in
specific
place
kind
to
of
fill
secret
the
sauce of
needs
a
for
company,
my
and that could be
kind of secret
voice
sauce of a
analytics,
company,
could be a
and that could
reporting
be
package, it could be
voice analytics, could be a
reporting
reporting
package,
custom development.
There are things that have to
custom
go on
development.
That's why
There are things that
this is
have
such
to
a
go on
great
top of it.
topic
And that's
for our
why
industry, because
this is such a great
it really
topic
hasn't
for our
existed
industry,
where
because
it really
you have a
hasn't existed
centralized discussion
where
point around
you have a
solution selling. It's
centralized
been,
discussion
oh, I
point
have to go
around
to a
solution
trade show
selling.
and
It's
talk
been,
to a specific
oh, I have to
vendor
go
to
to
see
a
if they
trade show and
can
talk to a
maybe
specific
potentially
vendor to
fit
see
my
if they
need.
can.
So that's why we like
potentially
kind of
fit
what
my
we're doing,
need.
because we're able to.
So that's why we
talk
like
them
kind
for
of
you.
what we're doing, because we're able to.
Well,
talk
being
them
the
for you.
whole app exchange helps, right? So having all of those different pieces and parts and being able to pull them together, I think, is a major functionality here. And it's about setting those. I think you guys are kind of covering some of this in that discussion as well, which is the buyer expectations. Like, you're setting an expectation with the buyer about what your product does or what your product doesn't do, more importantly. And I think in the receivables management firms are all very similar, but all very different at the same time. And after writing the policies and procedures for over 30 different groups through the years, you see a lot of commonality in the way that some things are done, but some major differences in others, because I think, John, like you were saying, everybody's got kind of their secret sauce for how they're doing it. And to be perfectly frank, the product, the age, right? There's a lot of variables about the specialty. It's like when an agency, as a, in my vendor management role in the past, if I ever talk to an agency or a law firm and I said, so what are you like the absolute best at? And they would say, oh, we're great at everything. I mean, that conversation is over right there, because nobody is, right? Everybody's got that specialization. There's going to be some people that do out of stat, other people that only work fresh paper and only credit card or only this or that, because that's how they're training their people. And that's the perishable skill set that they've developed within their organization. What are some of the tricks that you guys use to manage those buyer expectations on day one?
Well, I just want to share a quick story about the buyer. I just want to share a quick story about the buyer expectations, because it actually applies. I recently was in a discussion with them. So I recently was in a collection agency that deployed a platform. A collection agency that deployed a platform is essentially losing revenue. Is essentially losing revenue. The software can't do a big portion of their business. The software can't do a big portion of their business. That expectation early on was not set. That expectation early on, they don't have a legal management software vendor platform that's really baked out for what they do. Platform that's really baked out for what they do, Adam. And to your point, Adam, in that particular case, it really makes me mad when a salesperson or a CEO or somebody in that organization misrepresented what their organization can and can't do, because now you've seen costs, because now as an agency you've seen costs, the heartache of getting a new platform, you've gone through the heartache of getting a new platform, and there is no set expectations with your clients, and there is no back to get out of that relationship. It is extremely costly to get out of that relationship. It has to be. I think expectations have to be set of where you're going to. Expectations have to. I know that of where reputable agencies. I know that work with reputable agencies with anybody that we wouldn't trust. Latitude's a great example. They're very clear about what Latitude's a great example. They're very and everything that about what the platform can. Everything we say and everything that do. Everything we say it can do, it will. So I think the trick is just. So I think 100% the trick is never. And if you screw up, you say something that wasn't. And if you screw up, you say something that wasn't intended to be.
Yeah, otherwise you burn the bridge, right? Because if you take them
100%.
all the way down the path, they're making the expenditure, you're lighting that bridge on fire. And once you light that bridge on fire, everybody sees it. There's a lot of bridges over the river, right? So everybody else starts to see that, and unhappy people are rarely quiet people.
That's for sure.
Yes.
We've all heard the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? But if you've got someone who's truly unhappy or feels like they've been wrong, that's a very different situation to manage. But I think being able to find, coming over the top and hard selling versus building the solution together and listening to what they have to say and responding to those things and providing them with options. And sometimes as I've gone through sales throughout my career, I'll include an option that might not even be mine, just to put that comparison in perspective for that prospect.
Yep. John, what can you talk about selling to groups of people? I think now more than ever, you're seeing multiple decision makers. You've got your, the guy who's eventually going to sign on the dotted line, but you've got, maybe junior people. You got technical people. You've got the business ownership. How do you handle those?
Yeah, oftentimes that's referred to as a buyer's family. That's referred to as a buyer's family. So you have. Well, I'll start out with the hard facts, and that is. I'll start out with the hard facts, and that is, in my years, family, about 2 or 3 people that were really engaged. 2 or 3 people, the purchase of the product and the solution. And over the last decade, that is now increased. And over the last decade, that is now increased to roughly 6 to 7 people in the actual decision. That's a fraction of the actual decision. Now that's a fraction of people that need to be involved. But the actual people responsible for making that purchase, the actual people responsible for making that purchase, is 7. That is an astronomical amount of people to talk to. That is an astronomical amount of people to talk to and get. One of the things we talk about is one of the things we talk about having individual dialogue with each member of your buyer's family. Having individual dialogue with each member of your buyer's family. Have I met your needs, Chris? Individually, have I met your endorsement individually? Solution, and you have to go around the room for the solution, and you have to go around metaphorically. It's not. We're not in rooms together. Metaphorically, it's not. We're not in rooms together closing dialogue and making deals anymore. It has a long dialogue. Increased the importance. It has increased the consultative approach to selling and consultative approach to selling, as you not. Just hard sell, right? You said, because you can't hard sell to 7 people, because somebody's can't hard sell to 7 people. BS. Somebody's going to raise their hand and go buy. BS. But I'm not going to buy.
What about
but it has definitely increased. It has definitely. Yeah. So that's the other thing. Actually, we talked about this on a webinar. Yeah. So that's the other thing. Actually, we talked about this on a webinar yesterday. There's a difference of selling, and then there's a difference of there's a difference of selling, and then there's a difference of building an internal champion, somebody who's your advocate internally, and then co-selling together internally, and then co-selling together. That's even more of a powerful relationship. So if I build even more of a powerful relationship, so if I build a good, we're able to put together a solution that makes sense. When we're able to put together our ROI analysis, we understand where the ROI analysis, we understand what the iterations of the deployment would look like. We understand what the iterations of the deployment. We go in together, and so organization, and actually we go in together each organization, and each individual group that's going to be involved. That's a fantastic individual group that's going to be involved. And that's a fantastic partnership. Anecdotally, that relationship. By the way, just anecdotally, that relationship does not end. Process ends or when contracts are signed. That relationship is now a solid. That relationship is now a solid through friendship and relationship across organizations and across organizations. For the rest of your career. That's one thing for the rest of your career. That's my career, and I know our sales team does, and over my career, and that would work for any company, and so on. And that would work for any company. Build those relationships, hold on to them, and build those relationships, hold on to them. And
have you found any interesting ways to empower that internal champion? Right. So if I'm gonna have, like, if I'm selling into Latitude and Chris is is my internal champion, like, have you found tips or techniques that have been effective in helping him to communicate to the rest of his organization?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think it's really that's a great question. It's really everybody's familiar with kind of this term sales. Everybody's familiar with kind of this term sales. You're enabling your sales team with content. You're enabling your sales team with to be effective in a discussion. To be effective in a discussion, kind of my the new kind of my inherent. You're actually enabling your buyers to sell internally through the use of content, sell internally, personalized material that'll help them personalized material. So one of the things we do is we'll build out ROI. So one of the things we do is we'll build out ROI. Hey, let us understand your numbers so we can physically put some numbers on paper and show you what the ROI might put some numbers on paper and show you what the ROI might or any other platform. Or any other. We always send content post meeting. We always say, hey, here's what we discussed, and here's to say, hey, here's what we discussed, and here's a piece of collateral that you can use to, or a kind of collateral that you can use to kind of build your own. The other trick is just making sure you understand. And then the other trick is just making sure you understand what they actually are going to talk about in their closed door meetings. What they actually are going to talk about in their closed door meetings. You can enable them to be a little more on message. You can enable them to be a little more on message. The worst possible thing in solution selling is the worst possible thing in solution selling, and then your client or your internal advocate can't, and then your client or your internal advocate what that solution actually is to their buyers. What everybody has actually is to their buyers.
It's a game of telephone.
Everybody has a boss.
It is.
Yeah, it's a game of telephone. Exactly. It's a great point.
That internal champion really knows. It's a great point. They also have to become salespeople themselves and understand what each one of the other 6 or 7 people in the room, what particular hot button they need solved by the solution. The one thing, I think everybody will say it's better to have a champion, when you're trying to sell into an organization. But if your champion is just concerned about what the solution does for themselves and not what it will do for the other 6 or 7 people in the room, that can be very detrimental. So there's a lot of education about not only the technical solution that you're trying to say, but you got to coach your champion to say, well, what does Fred in this this part of the organization require? What's most important to him? What's most important to her over here? What's most important on the reporting end of things? What's most reporting? What's the CFO most concerned about? Is it cash flow? Is it something else? So those are. You may have a champion. You may have, and in our case, and what happens a lot is a former user of Latitude. They used the solution when they were a junior member of one organization. They've moved over to another agency or organization, or to a bank. They've got promoted, but they may have not have the season. They're not seasoned enough in their career yet to understand that there's other people that need solution from your solution as well.
So one of the that I've used in the past for this is the tale of 2 decks. And what does that mean? Like when I'm in the sales pitch presentation, I'm having that discussion with them, I'm using a shortened deck that's got bullet points, getting straight to those points and those kinds of things. But when I then need to empower my champion, I provide almost the same deck, but with detailed content, because nobody wants detailed content in a meeting. But I want to empower my internal champion to go and be able to clearly communicate the message that I've communicated to them across their organization. So providing them with some co-brand, whether it be co-branded material or however we customize it for that purpose, but getting something in front of them so they can go out and sell internally. Because once you've got that champion, empower them, right? You put a lot of work and effort into it. You've got someone internally at your prospective organization that you're saying this is, they believe it's the right solution for them. So empower them to go and sell it for you.
And if you're effective at doing that, then they can't. Somebody else in the organization, typically the chief financial officer, might say, "Well, you've got to pick the cheapest solution" or something like that. If you've coached your internal champion effectively, and they have been able to communicate across the board of all the people that the suite is meeting their needs, then there typically cannot be one of these sort of blanket statements, you got to buy this because of this, and which would upset everybody in the organization.
Well, and I think, Chris, one of the things that you asked, what tricks are there, right? I don't like to use the word tricks because obviously we're on a public webinar to disclose all of the tricks. They're just techniques or discussion points or logic, if you will. And one of the things I think we talk about, though, at least internally, and I know in sales leadership, it's well documented, is you have to identify, do you have a coach or a champion internally? And there's a difference. And for all my potential clients and people out there in the industry, right, there is a significant difference between an internal coach that is advocating and talking about your solution and you're asking good questions and kind of guiding you through the process, and somebody says, hey, you'll have to present to the CFO or the CEO to get the decision, versus a champion that's actually going to kind of stick their neck on the line a little bit internally and say, I've vetted everything and I've looked at everything and I feel very strongly that, this is the right solution to go forward with. And they're willing to put themselves out there. And, the hardest part about sales is truly identifying, do you have a coach or do you have a champion? And if you do have a coach, how do you help them be a champion internally so that they can feel confident that they can put their career out there and make a decision? And that just comes with experience. That's all it is.
How do you guys communicate to the buyer that they're going to get what they pay for? Right. And that, the cheapest solution is not always the best solution. And I know once we get to price point seems to be something that's discussed a little bit further down the line these days than it was in previous years. But, do you have any techniques for kind of softly communicating that message?
Well, look, we all need to be healthy companies. This is not a business to consumer relationship where the consumer doesn't have to run an organization on their end, so they're going to fight for the lowest price option because that's just a cost. When you're buying enterprise software, it's an investment in your future. And I would not want to go to a bank that was a low cost option bank and give them my money because they may not be around tomorrow to give me my money back when I need it. It's the same type of relationship. When we're working with enterprise software and we're working with business to business relationships, we both need to be healthy at the end of the day so that we can continue supporting and finding new solutions and providing service and so on. And anytime you dilute the solution and the value of the product by diluting the cost, all you're doing is pulling money out of that business, right? You're pulling money out of that relationship and out of that conversation. And there are appropriate ways to do it. Certainly, higher volumes can validate, or can be discounts can be warranted at that point because you're talking about a larger chunk of a pie. Certainly, anytime you have longer terms on agreements, you can reduce costs. But for the most part, I would rather increase that value box as an organization than decrease the cost. So if you say to me, hey, I need to, we're looking at your competitor and they're 23% less than you are, I would say, great. How can I give you 50% more value on top of what you're providing so that you can actually add more stuff to it and make a better argument? I don't want to be the lowest cost provider. I know Latitude doesn't want to be the lowest cost provider. Those just never work. It's a lose-lose.
It is.
Agreed wholeheartedly. It's a difficult conversation to have with some customers because they're so focused on the dollar point that they struggle to see the value attributes on the long or short term. And we learned that especially hard when we were selling a compliance software platform because it was a sunken cost in the early days of the CFPB, right? And because that was a sunk cost, you had these cost driven conversations because there wasn't going to be revenue driven from it. But you had to help them to understand the value that they're saving in lawsuits, expenses, right? And other things that come along with not meeting the compliance expectations that the industry and the government had set. So I think it leads to.
Yeah, and just one more thing on that, Ed. I'm gonna put my team out there a little bit, and he'll probably hate me, but Rob Fite is one of our enterprise sales. You don't get somebody with 30 years experience in this industry that can talk to you truthfully about solutions and all the value they bring without investing heavy in that sales organization. And, if you are going after the lowest cost provider, you're going to get a low cost service to that. You're going to get, you're not going to get an experienced salesman that's going to tell you the truth about what's going on. You're not going to get a top tier support team that guarantees SLAs and can guarantee things so that you can't afford it. So that getting what you pay for, I think, even starts in the sales process. Not to be arrogant or anything else, but I'm not going to go to work for somebody that offers the cheapest product. I don't think Rob would, or any of my sales team members would go to work for somebody that offered the lowest cost solution. Just we don't.
Agreed. And I think especially the sales team that you've put together, they've got extensive experience across a variety of technology platforms in the space, which allows them to speak intelligently about products and services available.
That's right.
So, one of the things that we've talked about is kind of that full service approach, right? And trying to be that end-to-end solution for the client so that you can come in, because what's the number one, at least the number one reason I've heard through the years that somebody doesn't invest in new technology? Oh, we don't have the IT resources, right? That's always the first objection to overcome is, well, you've got the greatest software in the world. I realize it could increase my profitability, in the 7-figure range, but I just don't have the IT resources to deploy that. How have you taken that full service approach and embraced it?
It's I think as we are in a very critical time in our industry in the receivable management space. Technology is changing at a very fast rate, and some companies have been on legacy platforms for 40 plus years. There's going to be a lot of reasons to change software, but there also conversely may be reasons not to change software. And that it's an important point to get across, is that an organization has to be ready, not just from a financial standpoint, or not just from a we've been on the same platform, we want to make a change kind of idea. You have to get buy-in across the organization. You have to gain the finances that can accommodate the ups and downs that go with conversions. You have to have a good understanding of the marketplace, and you have to have the resources to implement whatever solution you buy. And so until you're at that point, I'd rather not talk about changing solutions. I'd rather work on getting those pieces in place. So that's one thing I think it's important to understand, is that please don't go down the path of trying to rip the Band-Aid off until the skin is healed a little bit underneath, so that we can weather some storms together. And then the other thing is, by finding a partner like Latitude did with TEC that offers professional services, we're now able to offer even more of a full service package, right? Where we can actually do the implementation, the data conversion, the migration, the custom development, as well as the support for their technology, and they're providing the best of technology. So it's kind of a perfect marriage, in my opinion.
It's being able to provide a recommendation and then the actual deployment of that recommendation. It's great to sell ideas and thoughts and dreams. It's another thing to step in there and actually solve those problems on behalf of somebody. That requires a pretty deep, not only technical knowledge, but trust level, right? To be inside someone's technology and making changes to their production stack. But I think as we've gone through the years in this industry, people have had one solution and then they have a problem for whatever client requirement, whatever it is. They have a problem, so slap a Band-Aid on top. Then, 2 years from now, they have another problem. They slap another Band-Aid on top of that one. And you find yourself with these Frankenstein monsters. I recently opened a piece of technology that was .asp, right, which hasn't been supported since 2001. It's 2023. So it's like, but you see all of these kind of things stacking on top of each other in terms of the Band-Aids of technology, but helping someone to understand that they're going to have to rethink their application stack in order to get that same functionality has got to be a fairly difficult discussion.
But it is, and I think one of the things that we get hung up on is, frankly, it's a lot of work. Clients understand that it's a lot of work, and sometimes they're reluctant to put in that work, and so they actually hold off buying the right technology piece because they know it's going to be a lot more work on their end. Here's what I would say to that: that work can be shared, right? We can do that analysis of what you've got, all those Band-Aids stacked on top of each other, can be shared across resources. You can find a partner to do some of that work to uncover what you can do. And plus, when you're analyzing your decision to move on to a new platform, it's important to understand that those Band-Aids go away. That if you do it right, you're able to take the whole thing and get rid of all the support of those Band-Aids. And that's something that's missed a lot of times. They'll say, well, I've heard, just anecdotally, well, our legacy platform isn't costing us anything because we had perpetual licenses and we're just paying annual support, and annual support is going to be less than subscription. Well, the problem with that is you've got annual support, plus you've got layer upon layer upon layer of kind of spaghetti coded custom programming and development that's sitting on top of that you're having to support, whether you use an outside resource or your own team. It is a major investment in managing that whole stack. New technology hopefully removes all that. It removes the headache. So is that worth the investment? Generally, you can build an ROI case to say absolutely, 100%.
But also becomes one of the functions when you're determining whether or not to buy a company or build a new company, right? Like what happens with this old legacy application stack versus being able to come into a new business, select my technology on day one, and then run with that technology. To me, that's I've always kind of been more towards the rip off the Band-Aids and look at your whole application stack and where it goes. One of the things that I've learned through the years here is that bringing in different technology, bringing in different coders, for example, to solve on the same problem and to work on that same application stack, they may all be writing ASP.NET. They may all be a .NET technology, but you're still going to find these limitations to where, Chris codes it one way, Jon codes it another, I code it totally differently, the next guy that you hire codes it differently. Now I've got English on top of French on top of Chinese on top of Spanish, right? And it's not, even though we're all writing in the same language, we don't have the same tone, we don't have the same syntax, we don't have the same language that we use or the same way to solve a problem, because everything when it comes to technology, there's multiple ways to solve a problem. And if you're not going to maintain consistency in your solutions, you're going to find yourself with a lot of problems down the road, because you're going to have this Frankenstein of a monstrosity in front of you.
Yeah, you don't want to lose a Frankenstein's monster and then build yourself a brand new one.
Exactly.
That's not the way to go.
And companies sometimes forget about, they say, well, my IT staff does a great job managing all these Band-Aids and we haven't had a problem. That's true. But operationally, it does impact things downstream. So if you're, I'll give you a good example. Reg F is a perfect example of where it can actually impact, downstream, right? A software platform that was legacy, that had layers upon layers of Band-Aids put on them. And in order to get the Reg F compliance, you have to upgrade to a new version of that core platform. If you have too many different French and Japanese and Portuguese and so on languages built onto it, you can't upgrade your current system, and you're stuck with an out of compliant system. That's a fundamental problem operationally to an organization like in our space. And so it is an ongoing problem that we see. It is changing though, as companies are getting onto modern technology. Those Band-Aids are going away, which is really, really positive for our space.
Jon, I got so many technology questions I want to ask you too. I'm curious about how much of the industry has moved into the cloud versus on-prem. I have so many technology questions. We're going to have to do a follow-up webinar because we definitely don't have time to cover them all.
Yeah, if you're not on the cloud, if you're not on a cloud platform, you're missing out. Whether that's a private cloud or a hosted cloud, you've got.
I personally, I don't like managing physical servers anymore. If I can, they were.
Yeah, physical servers
It's been a long time since that was a worthwhile adventure, especially down here in South Florida.
Run away.
Where the power goes out like twice a day.
But yeah, we can do a follow-up.
So I know we're starting to run a little short on time, so I'm going to jump to this next one here, and I wanted to talk a little bit about modular solutions in our final minutes here, and talking about, because we've talked about the application stack, we've talked about how some of these things come together, but how have you guys seen the technology transform over the past couple of years to enable this more modular approach to technology?
Yeah, well, I'll just say from our side, not only Latitude side, but from Genesys side as well, we have a lot of customers over the years who bought components of the software that they just didn't need. And and we'll go back to them, hey, are you using this? How's this working out for us? Oh, so-and-so wanted that years ago and we just never, and you're still paying for it? Okay, let's right size you. I'd rather just right size them, or try to say, you bought this for this particular business need. Do you still have that need? And they're like, yeah, but we've just been putting, we've just never really gotten around to solving. All right, then let's see what we can do to solve. So I either they need it and we can help them do it, but there's just a bunch of customers that are sort of, we call it shelfware at Genesys. People bought it and they're paying for it and they're not using it. So I when I do discover this, I definitely want to solve it.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we've seen lately that's really pretty, I'd say commonplace in other technology, in other segments of business, but slowly starting to make their way into receivable management, is this idea of marketplace solutions. So, the closed box platform that can only integrate with the vendors that they as a company choose to integrate with, that model is going away. And it's good that it's going away, because frankly, there's a lot of great platforms and great solutions out there, and clients should have the ability to pick and choose what technology they put into their organization because it impacts their revenue. And a lot of organizations, including present company included, have kind of an open model of integrations. The systems developed for API-driven processes, so you can have integrated vendors into your environment that were not decided upon by the software platform you've chosen. And that marketplace is really becoming pretty popular. So I think that's one way that technology is really keeping up, is this idea of widget-driven or app store kind of models is really taking over in our space.
I think it's a really good thing, right? Because being like holding your customers hostage, for lack of a better term, and extorting money from these vendors in order to integrate, maybe 20 years ago, you could say that there's a cost to integrating technology and we have to deal with it. But now APIs can be written in a day. I mean, we're not talking about overly complex connectivity between organizations. So I think the claim that, oh no, it's so expensive for me to integrate with X, Y, or Z, I think those days are gone. The open APIs like at Latitude and other organizations that allow me to just sit down, custom code in and out of what I need to push in or out of that system should be super simple, right? Especially if that database is on kind of one of the standards like an SQL versus being on something a little more antiquated.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I think there's complexities to integrating two pieces of software, because you can integrate and it still doesn't do what you want it to do, right? And integration is iterative. It can be a number of different integration points. You're right. The point-to-point interaction of an API is relatively easy, but the understanding of what you want that integration to do does require a level of understanding of how technology works to make it all come together. So it can be time consuming, and it shouldn't be expected to be free. I'll throw that out there so nobody's getting the wrong idea. It's not free. It takes people time.
It's not a free thing, but it's something that you should have the capability of choosing to do yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. I should not get to decide that a system to another system cannot be integrated. That's a decision for you as an organization. And if it's a piece of technology you want to implement, like voice analytics or compliance management or something, data management, if we can put the pieces together, we should be able to do that. And that's what's taking over that I think is positive in our industry.
Well, I'll just say from our perspective, so Latitude has more than 48 different integrated vendors, and we're adding more all the time. Genesys, the mothership, as I like to call them, on our Genesys cloud platform, just passed 1,000 people in their App Foundry marketplace. I mean, is really everything that you might want to look at. And that speaks to the Genesys culture, which merged so well with the Latitude culture. Is we don't want to lock anybody out. Mm-hmm. If you have a better mousetrap and you want to integrate to us, by all means, we're open to it.
Yeah. Why should the software company say which payment vendor I get to use, or which telephony providers? I may find a better technology outfit out there that I want to use, and
especially for those commoditized type products, right? Like a payment processing, where it is a little bit
payment processors are big.
I was using that as my example when we were talking about the integrations, because I've written that API integration a number of different times across a number of different platforms, specifically in and out of those gateways, because the gateways make it available.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Now, there is a major difference I want to make sure the audience understands between an integrated solution and an embedded solution. And I know we're running up against time, but Genesys is a fantastic example of that. Latitude has an embedded version of the Genesys cloud telephony solution embedded in the system. It's a very tight integration, if you will, from a technology standpoint. It provides a lot of value within the Latitude platform. That's because they're the same company. But that doesn't mean you can't integrate other vendor solutions on top of Latitude to the same effect. It's just there is going to always be a difference between an embedded technology and integrated. And that's just part of it.
Yep.
Fair. Well, I think that brings us right to the hour mark here. So, gentlemen, I want to thank you for your time today, your insights, and sharing your knowledge. I think this has been a great discussion, especially for anybody who is selling in this space, to kind of better understand what has made both of your organizations so successful and such an integrated partner throughout the industry. So I really appreciate you guys taking the time with me today.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, Adam, thank you very much.
Anytime.
And I apologize.
That's all right. We appreciate you coming on an inconvenient time. I know this wasn't the best time option for you, but I appreciate you coming on and sharing. For those of you that are watching, if you have additional questions, we'll be posting the replay to YouTube on Friday. You can take a look at it there, or you'll be getting an email after with the option to watch the replay through Demio. But thank you so much, everybody, for your time and attention today, and we'll talk to you all again soon. Thank you, everybody.